So I'm just popping on the recorder now before I introduce Lana to you all, who isn't exactly a stranger. I think Lana has been part of the Amapiko and now further family for about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. She joined us at the Mamelodi Academy in 2017 and has been sharing her MEL monitoring, evaluation, and learning insights and knowledge with us ever since. And I think it's almost like 3 years to the day. Lana completed her Bachelor of Science degree in London and then moved back to South Africa to complete her honours degree at UCT, thinking that she would be a clinical or research psychologist. But all that changed when she saw an advert for a master's degree promising that graduates would change the world with research skills. And well, the rest is history. Lana has worked on countless impact projects in both government and the private sector. She has done work for Waves of Change and a host of other impact enterprises, including some of our own fellows, such as Neo Hutiri from Technovera, Siviwe Mbinda from Ituba, and Happy Feet, and our very own Diodene recently from GLLI. So Lana is also not only just an activist with a passion for animals, who she works with on a daily basis. She's a retired national netball player and coach, a yogi, and has a very dry sense of humor, coupled with a keep it simple attitude, which we firmly appreciate. And I think you all would remember Lana from a session that she delivered at your academy last year in Durban, a much warmer time. And Lana's really here to just recap and share with you guys a little bit more on monitoring, evaluation, and learning. It's a little bit of a recap of that session and also looking to where each of your projects are. I want to also say that I know it for a lot of you, monitoring and measurements and impact is all quite it's overwhelming at the best of times. And I want you to know that this session is really to help inform you. You all should have the worksheet available to you. And if any of you require assistance post the session, Lana is available. You can contact me. We'll figure out the details. But I want you to know that as you sit through the session today, take notes, participate, be fully present. This is such an important part of what you actually do. And I think now going forward, being able to monitor your impact is going to be more important than ever before. So go through the session with open eyes and an open mind. And then, as I say, we'll be able to support you should you require assistance after the session. Thank you, Lana, for taking the time to be with us.
It's always a pleasure.
Cool. Guys, as always, if you have questions, raise your hands. I have muted most of you. And then, of course, Lana will also be asking you questions as we go along. So I'll unmute you at those times. If you have questions, raise your hand, type it in the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on all those things. So go for it and enjoy the session.
Right. Are we waiting for Sam to connect and then we start?
No, go for it. I don't think we should delay any longer. Go for it.
Okay. Can you see my screen on your side?
Can indeed.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, Lindsay's done a great job of welcoming and saying good morning to everybody, so I don't need to do that again. Let's jump straight in. Linz, you can actually unmute everybody now because we will get into why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. And I'd like to hear from some of the people or the, what are we calling them? SEs still?
Impact entrepreneurs.
IEs.
Mm.
Okay. So I think Lindsay's explained beautifully why we're here. We've got the gathering coming up, and for that, I think part of your template is going to be to talk a little bit about what your impact is and how you got to measuring it. So I'd like to hear from you why you feel it's important to measure impact, whether you feel it's important to measure impact. If anybody's brave enough to speak up.
Yeah, Hi. Oh, sorry.
Go for it, Porsche.
Oh, okay. Hi. Okay, so I personally think the time to measure impact is when you're just starting off. Because if you don't know how impactful your product's gonna be, your company's gonna be, then what's the point of starting off? I mean, it's like you're running a blind race. If that's understandable.
Yeah, understand. We might not always be able to measure the impact at that stage, but it's very important to be able to plan for measuring the impact.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody else? Why are we measuring impact?
Sometimes it's an obligation. Can I say something?
Yeah, go.
Sometimes it's an obligation from your funders in terms of to their funders, and obviously for monitoring and evaluation, also for progress.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I'll move on. So main reasons, access to finance is greatly improved if we are able to show impact. It's a sign of a well-run ship, if everybody's familiar with that saying, right? For a potential funder to have a look at your side of things, if you can present a MEL plan, or what we're now referring to as a SIM system, social impact measurement system. So we're talking about SIM today, not so much about MEL. MEL is part of your SIM, but it would be great if you can show that you've got a SIM system. I think you're all very familiar. Ian always goes on about telling your story, and this is what Kanisa was mentioning. Impact reporting is here to stay, and it's only gaining momentum. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we can't hide from it anymore, right? So we've got to become fully invested in it and find more novel ways of presenting it. And then, of course, something that's very much aligned with further is contributing to you achieving your purpose. It's quite pointless to spend all your time, energy, and resources into something that you find out 5 years down the line was a total waste, right? And is not aligned. So why is it so difficult, right? You should be able, you're doing good. You've got a story to tell. Why is the SIM part of it or the MEL part of it so difficult? So what happens with the social entrepreneurs, or you've got what's called the triple bottom line. Most companies have a single bottom line, but because most of you tend to work with making or improving the lives of people and somehow improving the condition of the planet, you've got what's called a triple bottom line. Adding to that you're also trying to do something good for people and the planet, you've now got to try and define good. You've got to relate what you're doing to financial value. And as you might have seen, it's really difficult to determine or to identify the cause and effect. One of the examples is if you've got a workshop on improving confidence, it's very difficult to firstly measure confidence, right? And then it's also difficult to confidently say that you have actually had a hand in changing those people's confidence if they rate that it has improved. Something else might have happened. Just being invited to attend a workshop on confidence might have been enough for them to improve confidence. It might have had nothing to do with the content of your workshop. And then another reason why it's so difficult to do our sim is, because like a lot of you, this is all new and you've got a new enterprise, right? So there's not a lot of data that's been collected. You can't really spot trends yet. And you haven't done any performance evaluations. So you're not really comparing your program with another program. And then of course, also some of your domains are so there's such an intersectionality going on and an overlap that it's difficult to piece out what has actually led to what effect. So if it all sounds really difficult and stressful, there is a solution today. I sound like the salesperson. And it's called SROI. So first, Lindsay, if you can unmute us. I want to know if anybody's familiar with the term ROI, or return on investment.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, great. And how about SROI, social return on investment? Linda, you're not allowed to speak. Linda's been working a little bit with me the last week. Anybody familiar with social return on investment?
I don't know if the picture says it all.
Good. If you'll see from the previous slide, we had the profit, the people, and the planet. All right, so that's giving you a good tip there. So it's what social enterprises use to determine the economic value of the social impact that they create. So if an investor gives you R1, what is the social return, or what is the social value that you're creating in exchange for that R1? So an example of this is an organization in America where they train. Sorry, Linz, I'm trying to get out of my thing to get. I'm just needing I need to go to my browser. Got it. They do job training for working in kitchens, and then they actually get contracts with either schools or big government organizations. And they've used a formula that looks like this. Can we see this, Linz? Okay. So they take the change that occurred, which if you're a little bit clued up with the MEL world, that's going to be your outcomes. And then you times it by the financial value of that change. You can subtract what you cannot attribute to your program, and then you put it over your cost to create the impact. And this is what this organization did. And that's the formula, and you can see how they've worked it out. We're not going to go into detail on that too much, but basically for them, for every $1 invested with them, the social return is 71.8, which is a massive return. If you're going to a funder, they're going to sit up and listen when you present something like that as a ratio. So just an example of how you can shout about your SROI once you're able to calculate it. Linz, can you unmute? Let me just hear if there's any questions, or would we see hands?
We would definitely see hands, and I would also be able to check the chats if there are any questions, guys. So feel free to raise your hands. I'm keeping a beady eye on things. It's also important to ask questions as you go along, so feel free to do so.
Do you need a special consultant to help you on your project to quantify that?
Usually, yes. In your case, you're lucky because I can help you with that. So, but yes, mostly. But I'm going to give you the first step, and I'm actually going to show you how to do it. So you would be able to take a very good stab at it yourself without having to pay a consultant to do it.
Uber.
Dear Danae, you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, sorry. I don't know how that happened.
No problem.
Okay, so that's the formula that they use. Broken down, that's the most basic of what you're trying to look for. So your produced outcome divided by your invested input. So what is the cost of running your program? And there's a few different ways of measuring that. As long as you're comparing like with like, you should be able to get some type of answer here that makes sense. There's another way of looking at it where you take tangible plus your intangible. So some of you are creating products. So you would take your profit of your tangible outcomes, your products, add that to intangible, like taxes that have been created by creating people who are employable or employed and now paying tax to the government. And then you also look at your investment as your time. Don't ever forget to add your time plus the money that you're investing into your program. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I always have to say, before you can get to the fun bit of calculating your SROI, you've got to implement your SIM system or your MEL, right? So that's where we start to do our refreshing. So of our MEL system, we plan. There's our old friend theory of change. Then we create our data collection methods. We collect, manage, and analyze, and then we have our results. And once we have the results, we can calculate that SROI, which is great news for us because we've touched on our theory of change at the Kroll session last year. So everybody here has a theory of change. If you don't, then please don't start to get worried because according to your 9-month check-in survey results, 77% of you don't yet have a formalized theory of change. So please don't feel like you're alone and that you're now stressing out. We're here to refresh, and hopefully I've given you the impetus, the little carrot of the SROI calculation to motivate you to get onto that theory of change so that we can actually then, by the time you've got your gathering, have some type of an idea of your SROI. So I don't know if you remember this from the Kroll session. We actually went through this, spent some time in detail. I'm not going to do the same thing again today, but I'd like us to look at it and revise and I'm going to play you this video. I think it's a much more succinct way of explaining the concepts, and then we'll open up for discussion of the theory of change.
A fun way to visualize these concepts is to imagine someone walking on a beach. He sees a bed of rocks and thinks it would be a good idea to throw rocks in the water. The rocks represent the financial, human, physical, and material resources that are available to the organization. These are the inputs that would be fed into a given program or project. He makes the decision to throw a rock in the sea. The act of throwing the rock represents the activities of a program. Once the rock hits the water, they make splashes. The splash is the immediate effect of the activity of throwing the rock. In other words, the splash represents the outputs and is the immediate result of the completion of program activities. Outputs are the products and/or services which result from the completion of activities. The initial splashes, which are the outputs, create a ripple effect on the water. The ripples represent outcomes. Outcomes are the short-term and medium-term effects of the outputs. In other words, what changes occur due to the output. Lastly, the horizon represents the long-term goals, impact, objective, or the lasting changes that we hope to achieve by the program's intervention. It is the result of all the activities, outputs, and outcomes that achieves the goal. A fun way to visualize these concepts is to imagine someone.
Deja vu. Okay, so if we remember this slide from the crawl, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I think we're all familiar with that saying. And if we look at that, there's a theory of change embedded in that saying. We've got a target group, which we'll call TG. We've identified the problem, that they get ill often and therefore are a burden on our healthcare system. We decide that by giving them an apple, they'll get improved nutrition and immune systems will go up and therefore reduce the burden on the healthcare system. We've obviously got some assumptions underlying here, but for now, I just want you to be able to, it's very basic. I understand that very rarely does life look like this, right? It's just a very, very basic example. So if we take this theory of change and turn it on its side and place it into our log frame, that's our worksheet, you'll see providing the apple is the activity. The output is that they will eat the apple. The assumption is that they like apples. They're not allergic to apples. If they eat the apple, their nutrition will improve, the immune systems will get stronger, and that they won't go to hospital or to doctors as frequently. So if you've got this page handy and you don't have a, let me see quickly, Lindsay. Can we unmute, please? I'd like to just be honest, and who isn't at this stage yet? Who hasn't sat down and completed a basic theory of change at this stage? If anybody is brave enough to admit that.
Maybe put your hands up if that's the case.
I don't see anything on my side. Does that mean everybody has a basic theory of change that's on this call? Okay, great. So next question, do you all have indicators or metrics to be able to measure your outcomes and your impact? And is there somebody who might want to spend a couple of minutes exploring a challenge that they're facing with creating indicators?
I see Trabiso has her hand up. Do you want to share with us, Trabiso, or or you saying you do have your theory of change and you do have indicators in place?
That was my hand up for the previous question. Sorry.
Cool.
A bit late. But,
no worries. But while you unmuted, do you have indicators set up as yet?
I'm struggling to get indicators. I don't know how to yet define how I can see my impact, what I can see my impact as, because I think there's a lot of variations of what I could see impact being.
I see. Yeah, that would make sense.
Can I just be reminded of what the enterprise is?
Guardian Gabriel.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a tricky one even last year. So are you still at the same stage as you were last year, or have you made a little bit of headway?
I'm pretty much still at the same stage.
Okay. So Linz, it might be a good idea to put us in contact afterwards so we can hash that out. Because, yeah, it's definitely a difficult one. You've got a lot of challenges with your specific one.
Please and thank you.
Okay. So if nobody else wants to, so everybody's comfortable with indicators being referred to as metrics as well. Means of verification means the data collection method. So where are you going to collect your data from? How are you going to collect it? And it's also very good to be able to, it's called triangulation. So if you're saying that you are creating a nicer person, right? Somebody's got anger issues and you're presenting anger management, you can ask that person to self-rate. It's historically quite unreliable to ask people about themselves. So a good idea would be to ask the people that they live with, the people that they work with. So getting at least 2 or 3 points of data, and then you triangulate your findings. That way you are strengthening your quality of your data. It's not always possible, I understand that, but you try to where possible. And often it's not, I think it's going to be the case with Tabiso, it's not possible to measure directly what you are trying to change. You might have to look at proxy indicators, where you measure something instead, but it's relatable to the thing you're actually trying to measure. So these are some of the indicators that you shared with us in the 9-month check-in that you are measuring.
Can I just?
Yeah. Lindsay, you're muted.
It sounded like someone had a question there. Was that you, Sam? No?
Oh, can I jump in then if that's the case?
Sure.
Okay, so I use the same I use the same metrics as you're using, and I measure them weekly. But I'm using another service provider platform, and I just want to find out if maybe because that's not sustainable going forward. So I wanted to find out if maybe do you maybe have a software that we could probably have access to that would be more autonomous?
Remind me of your enterprise and then of the software that they're sharing.
So I'm using a YC software, which is on their platform, which I use weekly. My enterprise is the light with Wi-Fi.
And what are you measuring?
I'm measuring the number of the impact in terms of the number of users and the social impact on the community.
And how are you measuring that second one? That's quite a biggie.
It's difficult, but what I've been liaising with the community leaders and the police is one of the ways.
So a reduction in crime?
Yeah, but it's not very well measurable. That's why measuring users is more accurate.
Users is going to be a measurement, or it's going to be an output, right? You still need an outcome measurement.
Yeah, I still need the, yeah.
Why is it difficult to measure the crime or a reduction in crime? Can you not compare the same?
Because it's too vague. It's and the statistics are not completely accurate, and it's not very easy to measure at all. So using that as a metrics is less sustainable as opposed to as opposed to the other. Unless if we were with the police 24/7, watching exactly what is happening in the particular areas where I'm focusing on. But other than that, it's more of an add-on as opposed to a specific focus measurement tool.
Okay, so apart from reduction in crime, is there anything else as part of your social impact?
No.
Sure, so that's difficult. So we've got to find a way of, I mean, there are statistics, right? They have their stats that they produce monthly or annually.
There are statistics in the specific area, and those do exist. That is why I've basically been advised to rather focusing on the connecting users metrics as opposed to the reduction in the criminality, because that's easy to measure.
How are you counting people? How are you counting users?
Everybody that will come on the platform will have to log in with their data, and all the data collection will be on the server.
Does that give you access to the types of sites that they're accessing?
Yes, all the URLs are recorded.
So you have categories of whether it's for educational purposes or...
Yes, and the content is restricted.
But do you have enough to be able to draw conclusions as to what they're using the Wi-Fi for?
Yes, we have all the algorithms already set in place.
And is there a functionality where in future you could conduct a brief survey?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, all of that's already been done. The only thing that hasn't been done is the user interface protocol that actually entices them to be more interactive with the technology, as opposed to, but the back end is done.
The back end is done. But
yes, but the back end is not attractive.
So how would your initial questions about different software in order to measure this?
Yes.
Why are you saying this is not sustainable?
No, I don't own the software that I'm using now, and I wanted to find out if maybe you guys have independent software that we could probably have access to, that we could maybe use until we finish developing our own one. That will be our own one that we'll own.
When you say you, do you mean further, or do you mean the MEL experts?
I mean my gurus, my.
I also see that Lindo's hand is up, so he might be also lining. Well, he's got a question that he wants to ask, but I think that's definitely something that needs to be explored a little bit further.
Yeah.
I've made a note, Nkaniso.
Thanks, Nkaniso. So is Lindo's hand up?
Yes, there we go. He's unmuted, so I think he'll.
Yeah, I've been covered. I actually wanted to comment on Nkaniso's project. That I think most of his impact is access to internet resources. The crime obviously is important. You can measure that, but a lot of the people where he's placing these lights or Wi-Fi street lights don't have access to the internet, so they can't do the online learning, they can't apply for jobs, a lot of people. So if you could measure the sites where they're going, if they're looking for jobs, and they don't have to go to town, which is like 30, 40 k's away, and they're able to look for jobs where they are, then it makes a very big difference to people that really find it difficult to job hunt.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else?
Yes, I have a question. So during the questionnaire, which I administered to the trainees I gave some questions like a Likert scale, which you helped me to develop, by the way, thank you. And so I asked, for instance, what is your level of saying, knowing how to fix a computer, just for example. And then someone will say from worst to excellent. And then they will say 2, for instance. Or let's say 4, they will say 4. And then at the end of the program, it drops to 2. So which means you've sort of untaught them. How do you deal with such a situation? Is it because the questions were not well framed? Now you have to write a final report.
Yeah. So what often happens in a case like that is that you've shown them what they don't know. Your course has actually raised awareness. You've actually educated them. They thought they knew a lot coming on the course. And then when you did the course, they realized, oh, poop, I actually don't know as much as I thought. You didn't unlearn them. And when you write a report, that's a reflection. That's why it's called MEL, hey? That L is very important in the MEL part of it. And a funder appreciates when you can explain. And yes, it's possible that the question could be phrased different in order for you to guarantee that you've got a better outcome. It would be possibly better to have those questions broken up into more definitive skill. So are you able to replace a battery on a PC? Yes or no? Are you able to change a motherboard? Yes or no? Are you able to up the RAM? As opposed to just putting a whole big question on one Likert scale. Does that make sense, Dudane?
Yes, it was actually a specific question. I couldn't remember exactly what it was. But fortunately, we had a very good qualitative assessment because we organized this big meeting and the donor was there to see how they performed. So
great. So that's also when you triangulate. So you don't just rely on one data point, because if it bombs, you've got the other 1 or 2 data points to fall back on to explain what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, very valid point. There's a lot of people who get hung up on surveys and just getting these numbers. And it's actually really important to get some qualitative stuff as well going on. Okay. Dudane, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
Are you there? You seem to have frozen on my side. Is Lana frozen on anyone else's side?
No, Lana looks fine to me.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay, so coming back to examples of indicators that you provided, if we look through the list briefly, you'll see that some of them, like data on personal information of beneficiaries, is not really an indicator of an output or an outcome, unless we're trying to change personal information of people, right? So it all depends, it's all relative. It's not obviously we've got to measure that. I'm going to show you a really nice example of how everything that you measure, let me see. Yeah, so it's a program called Genesis, and they've done a beautiful job of explaining their entire program in one page. So we'll go through it. You don't even need to know the background of what Genesis is. You read their little tagline there. It's obviously work related. It's some kind of work training. And then we have a look at how they describe their program. It's 14 months long. It's 1,200 hours long. So already I can see that it's a high quality program. It's not just a weekend workshop where I claim to change the lives of people. They've got 4 components going on here, nicely illustrated with some visual. at a glance, I mean, I don't have to read every single word that's on here. I can get back to it. But as a funder or an investor that receives many, many applications, this one is giving me a good overview of what the program entails. Now I need to know who the beneficiaries are. It's telling me that 96% identify as students of color. Notice the way that they framed this, right? It's really important that we don't just say 90% are black. It's very important at the moment as well to say identify as or self-identified people of color. 87% participate in free or reduced lunch programs. This is a very nice way of saying that we're dealing with an impoverished beneficiary, right? We could have said 87% below the poverty line or below the ultra poverty line. But this is a good example of a proxy way to say something that could be quite sensitive. And 82% would be the first in their families to attend college. Also another way of explaining that it's quite an uneducated or an unprivileged group that we're targeting, they are targeting. And then they are shouting about 13x. And you're wondering what on earth is 13x until you now understand social return on investment. Now we know that for every $1 invested with Genesis, they're getting a 13.46 economic return, and in the form of these outcomes. And then they shout a little bit more about some of their outcomes. They're just breaking it up a little bit, right? So I hope you can see, this is all your hard work of creating your sim, of having your MEL done, eventually is trying to get to this point where you can show at a glance what your impact is and who you're working with and how you're doing it. If Lindsay, if you want to unmute, to just find out if there are any questions or comments on this. Everybody good? Okay, moving on.
Hang on a sec. Baso, you asked for another example. That was the example that I was referring to in an infographic form. Does that answer your question? Baso had asked for another example similar to sort of, another example like DC Central. And I'd said the infographic was coming up. So Baso, if you've got any, I'm going to unmute you. And I'm trying to, if you've got anything you want to ask, feel free. You can also drop me a chat. Cool. There we go. Baso, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Cool.
No, I'm happy with that example. It starts to make more sense now.
Yeah, the visual is, it's such a great visual representation, isn't it? Super.
Yeah, it works for me when it's visual.
Cool.
Okay, so Lindo, if you want to unmute yourself, you are welcome to now take center stage. We can let everybody know that I've been working a little bit with Lindo the last week to have a look at whether we can come up with an SROI for him, as he was one of those who admitted to having a theory of change ready and going. So there is Lindo's theory of change. It's quite impressive, I have to say, when you look at it like this. There's a few tweaks that we're going to make after the masterclass. We're going to work a little bit. I just want to go to a place where I can actually zoom in on it and show you just a little tip for the rest, for all of us. When you're writing your outcomes, try and phrase them in a way where it sort of uses the words increase or improved, and also decrease, so, or reduction in. So here we're saying drug relapse reduce in that community. We could say, Linda, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
See if you can rephrase that example of your long-term outcome by starting your outcome with reduction in.
Reduction in relapsing, in drug relapse.
Exactly, right? It's much more succinct and powerful way of stating your outcomes. So look at, we're going over here, less drug-related crime in that community. So how would you rephrase that?
Reduced drug-related crime in the community.
Perfect. Okay.
The word reduced.
Yeah, perfect. So here we've got employment. So you want to give that a try?
Yes, increased employment opportunities.
Yeah, something like that. Improve or increased. You've got improved livelihoods. That's nice. Okay, so I hope the rest of you are seeing that. So then next, what we would do for the SROI is have a look at these outcomes and pick some of them that we think we can find some financial values for. And that's going to be different for every program. Some you are actually going to be able to measure in your own enterprise. Others you might have to go and look at government fact sheets, or NGOs do a lot of research on especially the social stuff going on in our country. Sometimes there's nothing and you bomb out. And then you've got the option of going and looking for a similar program in another part of the world and seeing what values have been attributed to that and trying to find some kind of comparison for our context. If it becomes too far-fetched, then you leave it. Then you try and find a proxy. So if we're looking at this here, let's look at the like drug-related crime. So I'm sure we would be able to find some study that's been done or something that's been published on a government website that tells us what the financial or the economic cost is to South Africa of drug-related crime. Right, we can pick that one out. So this is what you would do. Ideally, every single outcome should be evidence-based, right? That is a very strong theory of change. So some of us might struggle with that, but as long as you can explain to your funder why it's still part of your theory of change, right? So if we go back, so for example, with Iziko, produced outcomes, we could look potentially at what it costs. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Iziko, right? Lindsay, everybody knows each other's programs. Okay, great. So we could go and see what rehab costs per government, if it's a government organized or facility. We also know that drug-related living has to do with homelessness, so we could look at what it costs to spend time in a shelter. What I found is a fact sheet from 2017, which actually gives me the figure of 136 billion rand is the economic cost to South Africa for illicit drug use. So we can take that. The study also says that 15% of the population are addicted to these drugs. So do your calculations and you're going to get an amount. Then we can also look at what, if somebody's out of work, what that grant payout is. So we can think, can you see that my brain is thinking of all these things that we are affecting, that we can put a monetary value to. So if Iziko is creating a product that's creating employability, at some stage they're going to reach the tax threshold where they start paying taxes, which is a benefit to the government, the same as the grant payout. So we can use this very basic formula of produced outcome, there's 3 that I've just grabbed. I'm sure that EasyCo is going to have many more when we put our heads to it and actually do this formally. And Linda also let me know that it's costing his program 1,340 Rand per month per person, which we relate to the 12 months, because that's what we're comparing apples with apples. So make sure that you're not comparing a government annual amount with your monthly amount, right? You've got to, unfortunately, there's some maths going on in here, but I know that most of you are much smarter with that than I would be. So you should be good. So currently, EasyCo's got an SROI index, a very rough of 2.6. Now, if we start looking at the reduction in wastage that they are doing by upcycling products, that number could go up, right? Linda, are you there?
Hello. Yes, I'm still here.
Have you had to think about some of these that we could add potentially in the future we can start having a look at?
Yes, I've thought about that most of our raw material we take it from scrap yards, but I've also thought about many other factors where a person wasn't supporting their family, or they were not happy. Other factors, their financial livelihoods. I've thought of those factors, but there's so many factors I'm realizing that I actually take for granted. I just think it's doing good, but I don't measure them.
Can I add something here? Just on the point of paying tax, I think it's such an important one to, you know, once people are able to reach that sort of threshold, I think it's a great indicator of breaking the poverty cycle as well. So to your point, Linda, like financial sort of livelihood, that kind of thing, that's also quite an important one, I think, not just for funders, but governments, so on and so forth. So yeah, there's so much on your particular project, so much cool stuff to measure.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I think it's when we're coming to proxies, if you're saying improved livelihoods or perhaps a reduction or ending a poverty cycle in a family, you could have that on your theory of change, and then somebody's going to say, but how do you measure that? And you can counter and say, well, people are now in a position where they're actually in a threshold where they pay tax. That tells you enough, a potential funder, of how you're changing lives. Yeah. Linda, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so I've been working hard in the past few months just to get our program accredited, in the sense that from the trainings that they're able to use the certificate elsewhere. So maybe an NQF2 for business. So that's maybe the one way I think will add a lot of benefits when I'm presenting it. That a lot of people they had previously had only a grade 6, but now they have a grade 9 level equivalent program. Yeah, so maybe that's the other thing I'm thinking of. And many of the other guys that were part of the program, if they didn't start a business, we'd incorporate them. So we've had teams that they were in our classes in 2017 that work for us full time now. So I don't even know how to write that on.
Dear Danae, I'm wondering if you can come in here, because I know your courses are accredited. I don't know if there's some cross advice here, or if it's different because your courses are online.
Yes, our courses are accredited by Cisco, so it's not in the same line. Yes, CETA would be the right, the right place to go.
I can come in there.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I've got a CETA accreditation. So yeah, maybe we can just chat offline, explain in detail. For example, recognition of prior learning could be also an addition to the guys that actually don't have a formal education, but because they've been working with them for such a while, that they can also be recognized and then be certified. And then the CETA also provides funding also for funding and also learner programs as well. And then if he designs his learning material, obviously it needs to be moderated and assessed, and then it go through the process of accreditation. So yeah, it's quite detailed, but we can maybe chat offline.
And you, so me too, I'm coming to you offline.
Awesome.
Okay, so that's where you want to try and get to at this stage. So let's see. That's the end of my spiel of SROI. I really hope that this time I've convinced you to start running with the theory of changes. I know that I'm preaching to the choir because most of you have your theories of change, but I'm hoping this is motivating you to strengthen it. Lindo's is quite high level, so it's also good to have a succinct way of explaining this as well. So have both options available for whomever you are pitching to. Does anybody have any questions on SROI calculation?
Yes.
Yeah, Baso?
Lana, I'm going through the slides here and the coffee is getting in as well, and my mind is starting to think in a different way than before, So now I have an interesting situation whereby, okay, let me ask this question. What happens in a case that you have the whole monitoring and evaluation template, the theory of change for a certain particular target group of people, and when you launch your product, you find now your product resonate with a different market altogether, like with our app, with apps that we've launched to the market, they've been bought more by middle-class parents because they wanted to teach their kids using our apps, not the entire market that I wanted to focus on, So what happens there? Do you have to change your theory of change, or do you have to have different theory of change depending on the different kinds of market?
Great question. I think you've answered it. You've obviously thought about it. Definitely you can have different theories of changes for different target groups. If you are going to write a report on how this is organically progressed, you would tell the story. We've said it's all about storytelling. But if you then have your next iteration, you could have two theories of changes. Or you can, if the first one is no longer applicable at all, you would scrap that and just have your new one.
Would that still make me a social entrepreneur whereby, let's just say that Sisanda is only adapted on private schools or to people of higher class compared to where it was supposed to be at the public schools?
That's interesting. Lindsay, do you want to unmute us? I think that's a very important question. I have a suggestion that I'll get to, but I'm very interested to hear what everybody else thinks.
It's a goodie. Cool. Unmuted.
Kaniso, did you hear the question?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? Was he asking if there's less social impact? Are you more sort of not capitalist, but are you is it profit driven? Is that what he was asking? I didn't understand the question.
So my question was like, initially I was focusing on helping people who come from the public school like myself. But over the past few months, trial and errors, when we are launching an app and how we see it being adapted to the market, we find that people who have their kids in private schools and people who are middle class and above are the ones who are actually buying into our services. So my question is, am I still impacting socially if it's like that, if I'm not longer serving the other market that I was bound to serve, or if I haven't served that market as yet?
On the what is that company again, Lana? The one in America?
PC Kitchen.
Yeah.
The second one that you used that had the info
Genesis.
Yeah, so obviously just because somebody goes to a private school doesn't necessarily mean they fall into the higher class bracket. So I think maybe it will depend on the type of users that you have on your application. So maybe they would maybe in my own 2 cents opinion, I think if you would then obviously you would have to monitor the data of your users, and based on the number of users that would fall under, let's say, the normal private Model C learners, as opposed to you might still have people on scholarships and people that might still go to those schools but might still specifically fall within the social disenfranchised members of society. So it'll probably be both, I think.
I've just also got a comment from Nkwazi saying it can remain a social enterprise. It will be in how he designs the business model. So there's a great incentive for you to be ready for next week's session, Baso. So that's something that if you can work that out in the design of your business model.
I also wanted to contribute in the same line, because that could be a learning that perhaps it's not affordable to your target group. And so what that also will give you an opportunity to rework your business model in a way that you can have the income generating aspect coming from those who are more affluent, and then reducing the cost for those who are less affluent.
Exactly. So it's something we refer to as unintended consequence. Right? And you identified now that the target group has changed. So you would have to go and use your L, as Dudene said, and find out why the target group, there wasn't such a big uptake on that. And then see whether you can design your business model where your new target group subsidizes your original target group. I mean, it's fantastic. We've got a program that was teaching yoga to kids in private schools, but they felt like they weren't doing enough because they actually wanted to get to yoga in the townships, but they didn't know how. So what they've done is they've pivoted themselves in a way that for every private school student that signs on, it funds somebody in Khayelitsha receiving a yoga class. So for them, it was an added perk for the rich mummy to know she's not just sending her child to yoga, she's actually sending it to yoga, and she's sending a child in Khayelitsha to yoga. So they were able to double the price and justify it, and they still had a big uptake. Make sense? The same with Shakespeare in townships. I don't know if you've heard of that, the Shakespeare Company. They also teach, and they do the same thing. They partner 2 schools up. So for every private school that signs up for the Shakespeare course, which is 6 months, they sort of adopt an impoverished school, and then they actually present at the Baxter Theatre on the same night, and they share costumes, and it also helps that And I'm going off on a tangent, but it's just lovely to see how collaboration can work between how you can target a wealthy target group in order to get to your impoverished target group. And for them to have them on the same night. Some of the impoverished parents aren't able to attend the concert. So the kids normally would have done their little play to nobody in the audience. Because they paired the two schools up, the more privileged parents are able to attend. The less privileged kids are still able to present to an audience. Obviously, they're trying to bus parents in and do what they can, but it's a nice model where you're actually reaching who you want to. Okay, enough about that. And then the last thing, are we done with questions? Basil, did
Yes.
any of that help you?
What, I have a question as well.
No, about assistance. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, can I have a question for Basil?
Show leadership.
Does your enterprise, is it a PTY limited, or is it a hybrid? In other words, including both PTY and non-profit, because that could also be part of the tax benefits on that.
We're still on PTY, and I've been thinking about that. If, like, is it making sense for us to have an MPO, and if it's not gonna be a lot of administration for us to deal with, for us to organize an MPO and also run the PTY on the same time. So maybe it's also where you guys could still advise me to say, this could still work for you or what?
Perhaps a masterclass on a hybrid model is required, I'm sensing. What the benefits are and how that works.
Because, like, for example, I've got a hybrid, and we got a funder to actually fund from using their CSI budget. So because of their CSI budget, they were able to fund us without without the tax implications. So, and then we still work using our PTY, but we get the funding additionally from that as well. So that's what has helped to actually have that both hybrid system.
Okay. Last slide. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. I think they're, Ian, you might be able to correct me. I think they used to be 12 and they've expanded them to 16. And what I would suggest is that you go and Google SDGs, have a look at these categories. They are actually predetermined indicators already. So if you, and it's also possible that your program hits more than one of these outcomes. So it's really worth, and also if you're approaching finance people, a lot of them are now aligning with the SDGs. So if your program is aligned with the SDGs from the word go, they don't have to change anything in order to get you to fit in with them. So go and have a look at the indicators. Sometimes you can strike it lucky and they're measuring exactly what you need to measure. So you will get some credibility from following this route.
Super valuable, and certainly a language that everyone seems to be speaking, you know, the SDG language. Great indicators as well, super helpful.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That's all I have to say. We have
no more questions, guys. Okay.
Great.
Well, that was a super session. Thank you so much, Lana. I think one of the big takeouts here was definitely that L, you know, these things are not always set in stone. Things change. As we know, things change and can rapidly change, which means that you are constantly learning and need to adapt accordingly and figure out other ways of measuring your sort of unintended consequences. It's much like, you know, getting familiar with numbers or getting familiar with targets. This should be something that should feel second nature to you guys. So we really want to make it as accessible to you as possible so that you get comfortable with your impact story and your impact numbers. And so, yeah, like I say, I've made a couple of notes of people we need to follow up with. But if there are any other questions or if you require further assistance with this, you know where to find us. Yeah, and thank you so much for your questions, and also so great to have you guys answer each other's questions, which I think is really part of it. Don't ever forget that you have this group to you know, ask questions to and share insights with. I think that's probably one of the great avenues that you guys have at your fingertips. So a very big thank you to Lana and to all of you guys. Always so lovely to engage with you, and we will meet you same place, same time next week to talk all about business models. Cool.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
guys. I hope you have a good weekend ahead of you, and we have Youth Day coming up. So yeah, I hope you manage to take some time to reflect and catch your breaths.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for all your comments. Lots of thanks coming your way, Lana, in the chats.
Thank you for engaging in what could be a fairly boring session. I appreciate you.
It's never boring with this bunch, never. And also, guys, we have recorded the session, so it does take us a couple of days just to upload it, but we'll let you know when it's on the YouTube channel.
Oh.
You might be an overnight YouTube sensation, Lana. Cool. Take care, everybody. Have a great one. We'll be in touch. Bye. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Do we stay on until everybody goes off, or do I leave?
It's no pressure. Thanks so much for that. Much appreciated. I see we have a couple of extra guys on. But anyway, thanks Emil. I see Ian's message.
Stay awake.
Yeah. Ian's actually messaged to say we might need time with you for our own SROI.
Yeah, thanks. I just had to take a comfort break for a few minutes at the end there, but thanks, Lana. That was cool. I suppose the question with particularly the SROI is it involves so many hypotheses and kind of, let's not call them guesses, but assumptions.
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes, like in our area, where it comes to human development and the sort of and yes, there are certain things you can measure psychometrically, but like so many of the projects have that sort of qualitative aspect where you've got to try and infer, because people change their mindset in this way, then this is the consequence of that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, any number of actuaries, if you've got funders with actuaries on board, they could drive a bus through so many of your assumptions. But I guess you've just got to go ahead, and as long as you believe they're genuine and well researched, then you just got to
evidence-based, and That's what's nice with some of your stuff when you get to those soft skills. It's been proven by other people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know it's already been established. So it's taken researchers 30 years to establish it. They're not going to expect you to do that yourself. But
yeah, because I know that was your whole model at Waves for Change, wasn't it? That once you've proven that so many hours of outdoor exercise in the company of trustworthy adults, that was all peer reviewed and established. So all you then had to do after that was measure the number of kids going through that experience. Yeah.
See where, once you find out what the critical dosage is, and just seeing how many you can actually keep to that. Are you watching what they're doing now during the lockdown with the? I think they're using WhatsApp as a platform to still remain engaged.
Who Waves for Change?
So,
who are using it? So Waves for Change.
So I think they, when we were there, we implemented the caseload system where it's one auxiliary youth care worker to, I think it was 15 kids. I don't know if they've been able to keep that up because their numbers have just skyrocketed. But it seems like I think they're asking for 250 Rand donation, and that buys enough data for the mentors to remain in contact throughout this whole thing. Because you can imagine, I mean, for an org like that, that's so dependent on a space that's now banned and then exercise that's banned. In the mental health, I see it with our one, Clever Kids, Smart Dogs.
Yeah.
We've lost touch with our kids. Some of my kids I haven't seen for 4 months. And we're super worried. And the ones that we do see, you can already see the backsliding.
Yeah.
We're starting it from scratch post-lockdown.
Well, it's the same, as you know, with Seviwa and with Ituba, because, and they've done a great job of migrating the kids to the IXL platform. But that's, that's a commercial education platform. And it requires data. So currently Ituba is funding the Kids for Data. And I've been trying to deal with the Department of Basic Education to get it at least 0 rated for data, but they've turned around and said no, because they're only 0 rating South African hosted sites, and they're only 0 rating free access sites. And even though Ituba pays the subscription fees for IXL on behalf of the learners, they're still not agreeing. And so it just means Ituba is going to chow its funding to try and keep the kids on the system.
It's such a pity.
Yeah.
But I mean, I heard yesterday that, I mean, the government contact tracers don't even have enough airtime or data to be able to contact the people they need to. That you would expect somebody like Vodacom or MTN to jump on board. I mean, that seems ridiculous.
Crazy.
I think they said they get 100 Rand airtime.
Sure.
For the month.
It goes in a couple of days, doesn't it? Anyway.
Well, if I've had contact with 50 people at a funeral, it's not even going to go through that.
Yeah, sure.
But isn't the system in the US where Google and Apple are basic, because they're the ones who provide the tracking data ultimately? Well, I suppose can they track you even if? No, I suppose you still have to have data to be tracked. Anyway, I don't know how it works.
I don't know. Well, the thing is, you need a phone. Most of our people don't. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, Lana. Yeah, and we need to buy a few hours of your time